this session, I am going to be talking about how you can engage your audience with interactive PowerPoint decks, which actually begs the question, why PowerPoint in an era where business intelligence is pretty much the norm. And see, the reality is this: anyone can create content using PowerPoint. You don't need special expertise like you do for Tableau, Power BI, Click, etc. It's already part of the workflow. Most people I see anyway take screenshots from either Excel or any of the BI dashboards and paste it into PowerPoint, and that is how the workflow is today. It also has the advantage of offline access. I've seen a number of people saying, I can't really give access to so many people to, let's say, Power BI or Tableau, but I can actually just take my presentation and send it to everyone. And IT departments completely hate this, but users find it very convenient. And it's also much easier for people to quickly create better design content. PowerPoint is a good authoring tool and it's pretty sophisticated. So the reality is this: just like Excel was never replaced, PowerPoint's not going to be replaced either. And in fact, arguably, it is the #1 data visualization platform in the world today. So PowerPoint as a platform is a default, and what we're going to be covering is really one specific part of that. First, let me talk about what I'm not going to cover. I'm not going to talk about how we create great PowerPoint presentations. I'm not going to talk about how you can tell stories from data, how you can design slides, how you can pick colors, what charts to choose, how you can create beautiful visualizations or maps, or even how to go about giving better presentations. We do have a data storytelling workshop that covers this, and I'll talk about it at the end. But what we're going to be covering today is a very specific technique: how one goes about creating interactive data-driven presentations in PowerPoint. To do this, I'll be taking examples of an operations team, somebody who's either in the sales operations or marketing operations or any kind of operations really, and the use cases will be things that they will find useful. And I'll share some simple tips on how you can learn more. If this isn't what you were expecting, listen on anyway. You may discover something new. Let's dive in. PowerPoint has 5 interaction capabilities: linking, animation, morphing, zooms, and plugins. And I'm going to show you what these are, and then the next section we'll talk about how to use them. Linking is probably the most straightforward. You can take any shape, and when you click on that shape, it takes you somewhere else. For example, this one took me to the first slide, and I can right click, select last viewed, and go back to the previous slide. This one takes me to the very last slide, and I can go back here. Now this ability to jump to pretty much any slide, so this for instance literally jumps to the 3rd slide, can be used in a variety of powerful ways, and I'll come to how it can be used. But for now, the technique is that you can link to any slide, and it doesn't have to be just a rectangle, it could be a circle, it could be an image, and it doesn't have to be just a slide. You can even link to a website. So this one, for example, is an image that's linked to the Gramner website, and that opens up in the browser. This is easily the most common interaction in PowerPoint, and the kind of things that we can do with this are pretty amazing. But first, let's learn how to create that. I'm going to do a simple practice session on this. Let's go to any one of these shapes, right click, select link, and that gives you an option to either link to a web page. You can type in any web page here, or you can link to a file, or you can link to a place in this document or another document, and so on. If I want to link to, for example, the 3rd slide, I click on slide number 3 and it gets linked. If I want to link to a website, I right click, link, and type in the website name, and that gets linked. This works in slideshow mode by just clicking. So when I'm on slideshow mode, if I click on this, it goes to the 3rd slide or the website. If I'm not in slideshow mode, I can control click, and control click will take me to that point. So to insert a link, right click and select, let's do this, right click and select link, and that will insert a link. That's the first. The second is animation, and this is also pretty common. Arguably, it's the 2nd most common interaction in PowerPoint. I can just click anywhere, and the previous shape that we had disappeared. A new shape appeared. Now, this is a shape that moves. So there were 3 possible actions. You could either make a shape disappear or hide, show it, or move it. This can be triggered either by me clicking anywhere on the screen or by clicking on another shape. So if I click on this shape spins. I can also use it for toggling. So if I click on this shape this picture becomes visible. If I click on it, it vanishes. Click, click, and we can use it for toggling. How does one do that? That's fairly straightforward. You can click on any shape and go to animations and add one of these animations. You're fairly familiar with that. The part that not all of you may be familiar with is how you trigger something. So let's say we want to add an animation that moves this rectangle down. So that's the motion path. And when I select it, this automatically moves down. But if I want this to move when this particular circle is clicked, then I can choose trigger and say on click off the oval number 6. There's only one oval here, so that makes it relatively easy. So now in slideshow mode, if I click on this oval, this moves one step down. There are many more features of animations. This is just barely scratching the surface, and it's another very powerful feature. The third is a relatively new one, the morph transition. It allows us to move smoothly from one slide to another where shapes explicitly take a different location, color, size, etc. So let's say we have 4 teams and each of them have a certain performance. Let's say this is the total sales achieved by each of these teams. Currently the teams are sorted in alphabetical order. When I move to the next slide, the teams are now sorted in descending order of performance and they are colored differently. But the thing you will note is that they moved smoothly. From the previous slide to the next slide, they moved seamlessly. And that is what the morph transition allows. Morph transition is a relatively new one. It's only supported in some of the more recent versions of PowerPoint, specifically Office 365 and PowerPoint 2019 and the mobile versions of PowerPoint. How does one create a morph transition? Let's do this. We have this slide. I'm going to create a copy of this slide by duplicating it. In the second slide, I can move these shapes to pretty much wherever I want and potentially even change some of their sizes and if I wanted their colors and their orientation. And when we do this, and in the transition section, select the transition we want as the morph transition. This automatically moves. So from the first slide to the second slide, the transitions are automatically smoothened out. How does it detect which shape to map to which? It has a fairly robust algorithm and you can actually override that, but that's an advanced trick that we are not going to get into. By and large, it works as you would expect and almost magically. Another new feature is the zoom transition, where you can click on any shape and go into a particular slide. In fact, you have slide previews. These, for example, are actual previews of slides in this deck. This is the first slide on this deck. If I click on it, we are zooming in into the first slide and the presentation continues from where the first slide left off. And then when that section is done, it moves back. This is zooming in into another section in the presentation and we can go forward or we can go back and then come back to the same place. This allows us to create structures that help us navigate the presentation. What that allows us to do is go from one slide to another in a layout, a spatial layout that we effectively control. And you can see that it almost gives the same effect as the software Prezi used to give a while ago. And all of this is possible with just going to the insert menu and there selecting the option zoom and then selecting either section zoom, which allows you to go through section by section or into individual slides. So if I select these 2 slides, for example, and insert them, that inserts 2 live icons. And when I go into slideshow mode and click on any one of those, it zooms in into that. When I go to the next slide, it zooms in into that. And at the end of this, I have the option of either returning back to the original slide. So I could, in the zoom option, say return to zoom or just continue from there. That option is open to us. This was the fourth of the 5 techniques. And the last one is just plugins. Plugins can add a lot of capability. And one such plugin, which I'm in fact literally using here, is called the polling plugin. It's from Poll Everywhere. It allows me to conduct a poll. So I have a specific question for you that I'd like you to answer. pollev.com/AnandS155. I'm going to type this on the chat window as pollev.com/AnandS155. When you go there, there's a question that asks you to answer, that asks you to respond either yes, no, or I didn't check to the question. Do you have a morph transition on your system? If you either know or can quickly check and share an answer, that will reflect here live. And I think most of you would be interested in seeing how this happens live. So as of now, 100% of the audience, that's probably one person, has said no. We have a majority saying no. Uh, about 50%, 40% now. 50% are saying yes, and 40% are saying no. So it looks like more people have the morph transition than not. And a few people have plugin in action and is a very powerful use case for interactivity. When running meetings, when running webinars, when running presentations, it really helps to capture what's the audience pulse. And it's not just questions that you can answer, but also run surveys, also get textual feedback and see how it goes. The poll is full, so I'm just going to move on and go into the next section. What you have here is literally the table of contents of these 720 odd page Challenger deck. This deck has all of the slides that we've used. And in order to navigate this, we have a table of contents. Let me in fact show you that deck. I'm going to get this slideshow mode and this jump into, for example, case study related to financial services where either go back to the index or dive in and go into one specific case study, which is related to financial services. So I can go back to financial services, or some of these are related to multiple fields. So I can cross that and go into narrative case studies or jump back into the table of contents and use this as a navigation mechanism. The larger or the more complex your presentation, the more powerful the use of a table of contents or an indexes. It doesn't have to be just at the beginning of the deck. It could be anywhere where there's a section that needs to be structured. And it doesn't have to be text either. In fact, we can even use maps and layouts as a way of navigation by simply using the links that we had earlier and the morph transition. In out here, what we can do is take the US map where we have more details about specific states and drill in. So for example, if I click on California, that uses the link action to jump to a different slide and the morph transition to smoothly map the US to the left area. And I can use the rest of the slide to put in any other content. I can from here jump to Texas for more information or any other place, or jump back to the map and then dive in into Minnesota and go back to the map. It could be a geographical map. It could be a spatial map, say a layout of a plant or an office or a store or a data center. Any kind of physical layout or even a logical layout is pretty effective when it comes to using links and as a way of navigation. This effectively is allowing us to drill down into the decks. Here's another way in which we can use links powerfully by using quizzes. Quizzes I find particularly powerful. A friend once asked me, I have an audience who always says they know the answer after I give them the answer. So how do I ascertain that I'm really giving them new information? How do I make them learn? How do I make them be convinced that I'm actually adding value? I shared with them one tip that I almost always use, which is I ask the audience beforehand what they think the answer is. If the audience gives the correct answer, great. It's not new information for them, but that's usually a minority. The majority of the audience usually stays silent or often gives the wrong answer. In that case, this is a great way of priming because you can run a quiz upfront and ask them for the answer. This is something that we did as part of a recent hackathon where we took the scenario of a diaper company that wanted to enter the US and this team said, let's go for a market of single parents. Which region has the most single parents? If you were to do this analysis and present the answer might not be so interesting. But instead, if you ask the audience, what do you think? is the region that has the most single parents. They may make a guess. Um, they may say, for example, that the South and Midwest are fairly conservative. So in all likelihood, they probably won't have the most single parents. So maybe they'd guess Northeast, but then they'd find that that's actually wrong. It's the second lowest. And though Rhode Island is one of the states that has a relatively large percentage of single parents, it really doesn't make sense to launch there because it'll be tough to expand into the region. So let's try again. Okay, maybe it is the West. No, West in fact has the lowest percentage of single parents. And there's more information and context beyond that. You try and let's say we get to South, and that is in fact correct. South has the highest proportion of single parents. What we're doing here is, in the case of wrong answers, giving them additional information and context explaining why to increase their learning, and in the case of the right answer, reinforcing their understanding. All of this is being done through simple interactivity that is provided by links. We can do this before giving the answer. Those are pre-quizzes, they prime learning. You can do this after giving the answer. Those are post quizzes and they validate people's learning. But wherever you do it, quizzes are fun. You can also build up progressive revelations. Charts are complex. Even simple charts can be complex. So if you start by explaining it step by step, it helps. For example, we can say that we are talking about how long it takes for cargo to move during the evening, morning, and night shift, and how long it takes on Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, Mondays, etc. But when we combine the two, we find that the time that it takes on Friday mornings is pretty bad and Thursday mornings is pretty bad. And step by step, build up the story to highlight the most important parts, saying here's where things are moving really slowly. That is a way that helps people understand and explain the story in a narrative. And this too is made possible through the interactions, specifically animations. In charts, the standard practice is to start with the axes, explain the elements, and then move on to the rest. Doodling is also now possible as part of PowerPoint's new capabilities. You can literally draw on a tablet and save that as drawing ink and create these kinds of doodlings. How does one do that? Well, there's a draw feature where I can draw pretty much anything and any number of things as well. And when we do this, these are stored as something called ink. And animations support a feature called replay that allow you to control how long it takes and how much and in what sequence they're ordered. So you can, for example, say that I want the second one to start after the previous, and I want both of them to take only 1 second so that they'll appear one after another, roughly the same order that I drew it in. So doodling in PowerPoint takes as little time as this. Of course, learning how to doodle, that probably takes a few years. That's a different skill altogether. Another way in which we can use this is through the morphs animation or morphs transition, which allows us to retain context. You saw the map situation earlier, right? So let's say that we want to highlight something about a few specific states and explode them. Now, if somebody just looks at a state with this shape, it's unlikely that they'll remember what state it is or where it came from the overall picture. But using the morph transition, if we move the states into a different location, people still see where they came from. So there's a lot less confusion about this having come from this region and is therefore Utah, or this is California because that's where it was. The morph transition allows us to see changes while still preserving context. So anytime you want to show a change, the morph transition is a good place to look up to. Specifically, let me show you some examples of powerful examples of how the morph transition can be used. PowerPoint supports 3D objects, and you can, for example, present to an airline maker that their left wing had some particle damage during the flight, and as a result, the bottom side of the wing has particulate damage and was eroding under higher resistance. You can go back and forth, show them different views, and see the same thing from different perspectives if you have a 3D model around it. 3D models are fairly easy to get if you're looking for standard models. If you go to insert and 3D models, you can download them from online sources. But that apart, there are several tools and several people that have the business of creating 3D models. Another very powerful use of the morph transition is to create bar chart races. you would have seen an email from me earlier explaining how the bar chart trace can be created using PowerPoint. And this can be used to create some very effective visualizations. Let me show you one that we recently created. This is the anonymized version of that. Supposing we have the profit of a company across different countries. Where is the maximum profit, and where how does it compare against the expected profit? So in April 2019, the US has an expected profit of 296 million, but has only made 164 million so far. And in this month, it's by far the furthest ahead. But as we move next, US has caught up against its next month's target and its performance is better, but the other countries are not so far behind, with Germany and Singapore being the next. The next month, US is still ahead, but Thailand has overtaken Germany and Singapore has moved down a lot. So in fact, if you see who's moved up, Singapore has clearly moved down. New South Wales has moved up a bit, and Thailand has come in new into that list. The changes are much easier to spot in such visualizations, but you can emphasize them. So you can say, for example, that I'll make New South Wales and Hong Kong strong to help people understand that these are the ones that have improved. You can go back and forth and see the changes across. You can use any form of highlighting. For example, you can use annotations like this. You can use a rectangle and change the shape of these. But all of these are ultimately created in a very simple way, which is you have a series of slides in which the slides have content that is morphed from one level to another. Creating a bar chart race, while a little time consuming, is actually one of the things that PowerPoint is quite effectively suited for. Another is what's popularly called as a Sandance these days. Unit charts where you group them into different categories. For example, let's say these are a series of projects and we want to present to our client what projects we've done for them, for whom, etc. So we've done 60 projects for the United States and each of them have a different type. In India, we've done 36 projects and these are of different types and so on. But if I want to group them based on the type of offering, oh, sorry, I'm not the wrong one. Could just jump to the right slide. Bear with me. Okay, let's just jump here. Okay, here we go. Um, yeah. So if I want to go to the offering type, then it groups the projects that we've done into the different types of projects that we have. Or if you want to group by industry, what are the industries that we are serving? The same projects then get moved into those industries. Effectively, we have unit charts, that is each object, each entity is represented by one icon, and these icons move around based on how we group them. This can be used very powerfully to understand data distribution. So we can see, for example, that from financial services, a few of them break into ELA and staffing solutions. Or if you look at the projects that are in the United States, then these projects are fairly evenly splitting up into performance optimization, vendor technical services, resale, etc. So patterns like these, and or for example, switching, most of switching happens to be in the manufacturing space. Patterns like these and distributions become much easier to spot when we have a Sandance kind of a visualization. I'm going to talk about a few others that are a lot tougher to create in PowerPoint, but once created, they are very effective. This one is called a sunburst. Some of you may have seen this on our website earlier. A sunburst allows us to drill down and get specific kinds of information. So if in a board presentation, we want the audience to understand how sales is broken down by geography. So the size of the bar represents the amount of sales, and then further by channel, and then by product. Each of these bars tell us how a segment is performing, green indicating that that segment is performing well, and red indicating that the segment is not performing well. So if I want to understand why product 9 in the stores channel in the UK is not performing well, is that because product 9 is not doing well in general? I can click on it and get a drill down that shows how product 9 is performing, and it's clear that it's not performing well anywhere except in the partners channel in Japan where it's doing okay. So is that because the partners channel is doing well? Let's click there, see how that works. And it turns out the partners channel has a very mixed performance. This allows people to answer questions on the fly. The person who's presenting and the audience can chart their own path, effectively bridging the gap between linear presentations, and pure exploratory, which can meander all the way. Another type of presentation, specifically answering the question, where do we have a problem, is the drill down tree map. So in this case, let me take the example of downloads from an app store. I'm going to go to uh, this page where on a particular day, let's say the 30th of April in 2013, each of these boxes represents the total volume of downloads of apps from the App Store of various categories. The color represents which segment is growing. Overall, they are reddish or orangish, indicating that none of these are really growing much, but education is growing a bit. Why is that? Click on that to drill down, and we see that most of the areas are doing okay. Listener is probably doing slightly better, but cameraman is doing the worst. Why is newbie neutral? Or if I click into games, why are the listener segments not downloading games? Mainly because, and we can look at the devices that have been downloading the game. So Android 4 growth has not picked up, iOS 4 growth has not picked up, Java ME and Android 2 are also not doing a good job. So this is where the problem is. In the retired segment, it's in most of the areas with the exception of Android 3. So to find out where the problem is, a drill down tree map becomes a very powerful and effective tool. Another way of achieving this, but in a slightly different way, is to answer the question, why do we have poor performance? This can be answered through a Sankey. And let me show you how that works. So let's take the same example of the App Store. I have a large number of downloads coming in from the US as a country, followed by China, Germany, etc. And the colors indicate how fast we've been growing. So Android 4 has not been growing as fast as iOS 4, which is greener, and so on. So why is Android 4 not growing? That's mainly because the games category, which is the largest chunk of downloads, has not been growing, nor has the education or the tools category. Though music and video has been growing, it hasn't been enough to pull it up. So why haven't games been growing? That allows us to drill down further and say that it's mainly because the newbie category wasn't growing for games, nor was the double income no kids category. But the effect of the listener category has been enough to make it neutral. So why is iOS growing? Because every single segment is growing. Why is education growing? Because barring double income no kids, listeners, and browsers, the other segments are growing. It allows us to answer the question why something is happening by drilling down into the next level. Finally, there's one more kind of use case that I've seen that's pretty common. You've probably seen Hans Rosling's motion charts, and these are ways of showing multiple dimensions at one shot over time. But it can also be used for drill downs. So here, for example, we have a series of products. Each of these circles represents one product, which is shown against what market share they have on the horizontal axis. So RPT has the highest market share, and what growth rate they have. So what's on top has a higher growth rate. So CNC is growing the fastest, B2B is growing the slowest. Now, if you want to find out where they're growing fast, so let's ask the question, RPT has a great market share. How is it broken up by geography? So in Singapore, for instance, it's doing reasonably well, but not quite in Vietnam, not quite in Thailand. In Malaysia is kind of okay, but it has a reasonably high growth rate. This allows us to break down each of the products into the constituent regions and then see how those regions are performing to allow us to further answer the question how subgroups are performing, leading to the overall group's performance. All of these visualizations and all of these data-driven interactions have been using just the same 5 techniques that we saw earlier. And I've put them together in different ways in line with what the client needs to see. These are some of the use cases. These are typical operations use cases, some of which you will be able to create, some of which will take you a certain amount of practice, some of which will require tools and plugins. But the intent here was to show you what's possible, and the recording of this webinar will give you some more information or insights as you listen to it or see the slides on what you could be doing. But that begs the question, what should you be doing? And a quick time check, we're fortunately only 2 minutes behind schedule, so we've managed to catch up. Well, the first thing to do is to learn, practice, and teach. That's because as you learn, you know what's possible. How do you learn? The easiest way is to go through every item on the PowerPoint ribbon. Just literally go through every single thing here. I today, for instance, saw the recording ribbon, And within that, there's a record slideshow, and there's a save as show and export to video, and I haven't yet explored them. When I went to the options, I realized that there were some menus that I hadn't even explored before. So under the choose commands, all commands, there are a huge number of options. And when I spend time exploring these, sometimes days pass by, and that's not even an exaggeration. As you learn, practice those. We really learn by doing, not by reading or listening. Just try all of the practice exercises on this deck. Try out the new features that you're learning about, and take your last presentation, take your current presentation, and try these practices. That's when you'll know that this can be used in a certain way. And finally, teach what you've learned. Share what you've learned with your friends, with your team members. You can organize a session where you show what you've done, you see their work, and you can learn together. That's when, as a team, you'll be able to progress and they'll be able to reinforce your learning. So, that is purely from a technique and a skill perspective on things that you can practice by yourself. Where can we support? We support in two ways. Gramner runs a series of data storytelling workshops. There's a 1-day version and there's a 5-day version. These cover not just how to create presentations, of which we saw a part, but also how do you understand your audience, find the insights, what's the storyline you create, and how do you actually create content. This is not restricted to PowerPoint. This covers Power BI, Tableau, the BI solutions, as well as PowerPoint, depending on the variation you want. And we run this for corporates and colleges. If you're interested, we'll contact you with the details, and I will be running a short poll right after this to check your preference. We also have a PowerPoint plugin. Many of the things that you saw that you said, wait a second, hold on, did a human actually create those charts or visuals? No, not in most cases. We have a plugin that allows us to create more complex objects from data. This is what helped us create bar charts, traces, sand dances, etc. We haven't launched this publicly, but we are launching a beta version of this in March. And if you're interested, we'll certainly keep you informed. So I have a short poll. If you had to pick only one of these two options, which would you pick? You can go back to the same link, pollev.com/AnandS155. You can go back to the chat window. The link is still there. And when you open it, it asks you for one of three choices. Either you're interested in the storytelling in PowerPoint workshop for your team, or you're interested in the beta version of the SlideSense plugin, or neither of these options, and we won't contact you. The experiment that I'm running is to see what is the level of interest relative to these, and well, neither, but it's kind of interesting that neither seems to not have picked up much interest. So we'll give that a few seconds until the poll reaches its limit, and then we'll open up. Okay, the poll is full, and overwhelmingly, most of you seem to be interested in the plugin. That's useful. I'm conscious that the poll is limited in terms of the number of responses. You're more than welcome to reach out via email for either of these. I was just curious to get a quick pulse of what's more popular. So with that, we are bringing this webinar to a close, but we'll open for questions and answers. We'll have a poll running to get your feedback. Your feedback on this webinar is extremely important to me because my intent is to make sure that a large number of people get the benefit of the skill. And if you tell me how this could be improved or what works well, that's something that I'll keep in mind to make sure that the future audiences get the most out of this. But with that, we are open to questions, and you can feel free to put those in the chat window.
Do you conduct these workshops online?
We do conduct these workshops online, not the full version, but the abridged version, which is a 1 to 3 hour workshop, not the full workshop. But yes, there is an online version of it that we offer.
Okay. Can we have more of such PPT sessions to have better understanding of the same?
This is actually a small part of a much larger program. And what I can do is take different portions of the overall workshop and have those run as webinars. Absolutely not a problem. We'll pick and choose which ones because some of them really are technique based, some of them are practice based, and some of them will not make sense as standalone modules. We want to make sure that what works as standalone will be available as webinars. So some of those absolutely we will be having a few more on how you can use not just PowerPoint, but any kind of narration and visual tool, including the likes of BI tools and the techniques around those.
Okay. There are a lot of questions asking if the session is recorded. Yes, the session is recorded. We'll be sharing the same once the recording is done. Probably you'll be receiving it by tomorrow. And also you'll receive the slides that we have used during this webinar. We have a few more questions. Do you have plans for similar sessions on MS Excel? And do you suggest any reference blogs or sites to refer?
Okay. Excel is extremely powerful. It's probably going to need many sessions, but no, at the moment, we don't have any plans for sessions in Excel. We push Excel to the bounds a lot, but it's not part of our offering, so we haven't really thought about that. In terms of, sorry, what is the second part of the question, Sanish?
Do you have any suggestions for reference blogs or sites?
Okay. Chandu.org is a pretty solid reference. That apart, I always find going through the Excel ribbon itself very powerful and exploring the formulas very powerful. In recent times, I've found it useful to go through what's new, especially on Office 365 or Office 2019, because a number of new features have been released over the last couple of years.
Do you also have workshops on Excel specifically for financial industry? I think we have already spoken about it, but do you want to take it up?
We don't have any workshops for Excel for the financial industry. We do have workshops that are around insight generation, around storytelling, that are tailored to the financial services industry. But the focus is not as much on Excel as a tool as it is on finding insights.
Okay. Did you use MOF feature to do drill down?
Yes, we do often, and a simple way of doing that take is to take the higher level feature and move it into a side area and then have the lower level features come up. If you remember how the US map was constructed, we had the large US map and then 4 states highlighted. When we clicked on one state, the entire US map moved from being the main visual to a navigation icon on the left hand side that tells people that it's only a portion of it, and then the rest of the slide has more details. However, most of the visuals that had a drill down, they didn't use the morph feature. That wasn't required. What we instead used was either animation, which was in about 1 in 4 cases, or just linking, which was in 3 in 4 cases. Which incidentally also means that those drill downs are available in earlier versions of PowerPoint.
Do you have a blog or a YouTube channel to get answers to these queries while we are working on our project?
We don't yet, but I'll take that as an input, and that's something that we can certainly start. What we'll do is, Sanish, maybe between us, we'll take that as an action to reach out to the
Okay.
participants on this forum to revert when we have a Q&A forum or a YouTube channel. But the videos
Hmm.
that we create, the public ones, are posted on the Grammar YouTube channel, so you certainly could access that.
Sure. This is one interesting question. How is the response from clients? Curious to know how open they are to try out in their day-to-day work life.
So, which was one of the reasons I was intrigued to see what the response to the last poll that I had was. The majority of the clients actually prefer the workshop to the plugin. As far as they're concerned, it's a capability building exercise. But what I'm realizing is that the end users really want tooling more than technique. So we've been a little slow on the plugin, mainly because we've operated largely in a B2B space, and the response is very, very positive. In fact, overwhelming for the workshops, which is why we started it. But now that we realize that there is a more interesting kind of a demand in the B2C space for the plugin, that's something that we'll be placing as much emphasis on.
Okay. We have 5 more minutes, I guess. So, in the market, we have Tableau. So, isn't it that Tableau is better than PPT or other way around? And on which application should we focus on?
Sure. So these are largely complementary. It's kind of like saying we have Excel, so should we focus on that or PowerPoint? Tableau is sort of like Excel on steroids, and it allows you to discover answers and visualize them in more powerful ways to help you discover the answer. But Tableau was always intended as a tool that helps you find the answer, not share the answer. Over time, it's evolved to a tool that makes it easier to share the answer. The storylines in Tableau are one such powerful feature. And in that sense, it's certainly evolved. But it still is primarily a tool that's intended to find the answer. PowerPoint is a tool that's intended to communicate the answer. And we are yet to find the equivalent of a Tableau for PowerPoint that allows us to do it at that level, at that scale. And that's an ongoing discovery. We in Gramner had built GramX as a platform that is intended to do it. On the one hand, it does a great job for developers, but we haven't yet built a tool that, we don't know of anyone who's built such a tool that allows them to do it for the others. Adobe, Microsoft, many organizations are trying this, but we aren't quite there yet as to what that solution will be. So short answer, do your analysis in Tableau or Excel, but when the time comes to present, quite often you will find yourself going to PowerPoint or asked to go to PowerPoint, and therefore it makes sense to pick up PowerPoint.
Okay. When is your next data storytelling workshop?
I hadn't planned one, but let me make a commitment that it will be um, just next month in April. I'll try and schedule things so that we have a webinar a month.
Okay, I think we are pretty much done with the questions. There's one more interesting actually. How did we do this live poll? The website reference, in fact.
Oh, the live polling.
Yeah.
Poll Everywhere is the site. You can just go to pollev.com or just do a search for polleverywhere.com and you'll find it. It's a plugin that's available directly in PowerPoint. You can just search for get add-ins and search for polls. You'll find many such plugins. I literally picked the first one that came on the list and tried it out, and it worked fine.
Okay, there are a few standard questions, but I'll take it up in our follow-up email that we sent. So thank you everyone for attending this section. I will be sending you the recording of the same along with the slides.
Thanks a lot, everyone. You've been a great audience. Take care. Have a good day.